How's everyone's Monday morning going? Woo! Everyone happy back in San Diego? I just want to quickly introduce myself. I am Claire Zhao. I'm an investor at GSV Ventures and program lead for the summit, and I'm your virtual MC for the next 3 days. We have a jam-packed program, 200 plus sessions, 900 plus speakers. It's going to be awesome. And without further ado, I want to kick it off to the panel, The Future of Education in California. Monica, off to you.
Oh, thank you so much, and welcome everybody. For those of you who are joining in person as well as virtually, we have all of 30 minutes to talk about the future of education in California, so we're going to move quickly. I want to introduce this panel, really some of the most compelling and innovative educators, thought leaders across this country. On my left is our host, President Michael Crow from Arizona State University. Superintendent of Public Instruction, Tony Thurmond, who represents 6.3 million students across the state of California, and our California Community College Chancellor, Eloy Ortiz Oakley, also representing over 2 million students, 116 campuses. And if we've learned anything over these last 2 years, is that out of calamity, out of crisis, we are compelled to innovate. We can no longer think about recovering to what was the state of education in California prior to the pandemic. What I like to say is that these moments when we are really called upon, challenged, these are moments for us to not just rethink, but to actually reimagine and then rebuild towards a new, much more equitable system of education. And no one better than these three individuals to talk about how do we use innovation, how do we use technology, how do we think about a new learning environment that is inclusive, that is accessible, that is affordable, that is efficient, and that meets the needs of our students. So we're going to start with a question to all of you. We're in this summit. As we heard, it's a global summit full of people who are innovators, who are educators, but who may not be familiar with the California context. So for those of our guests in the audience who want to learn more about California, what should they take away as they think about introducing new technologies, new forms of instruction, new ways of making our educational systems more equitable? Eloy, I'll start with you.
All right. Well, good morning, everyone. So I could take up the whole 30 minutes talking about this, but I'll keep it brief and to the point here. So we're in a room full of ed tech entrepreneurs. We're in a room full of innovators. We're in a room full of public, private, nonprofit, for-profit sector individuals. I spend way too much time on Twitter, but I read a tweet once, not too long ago, writing the obituary for the California community colleges because of the pandemic, because of everything that's been going on, because of the enrollment decline in California. And I would say to you that there is no ed tech sector without institutions like the California community colleges. We have the scale necessary to really perform a recovery with equity like we need. So I would say to you that the needle that we need to thread is how we work together, how we leverage the innovations that are happening, how we use the public institutions that have the trust of the public, and work together. And I would say the same thing to a room full of 116 college presidents in the California community colleges. Figure out how you're going to leverage the innovations happening. Figure out how those partnerships are going to happen so that we can focus on what California and really the country needs, because 1 out of every 4 community college students is a California community college student. So if we impact California, we impact the recovery for the nation.
Tony, next.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
That's the first thing you need to know. We have vibrant, robust, talented 6 million students in our state who are all going to work for you one day. But I would put it in context of where they're coming from. California students and families, like students and families everywhere in the world, have had a hard time these last 2 years. And so our students will be able to recover academically, but we can't replace lost seat time. We have to think differently about how we approach our students in our state. And to be frank with you, if we don't start by addressing the trauma that students have been through during the pandemic, then we won't be able to put all the innovations in front of them in a way that they fully grab hold of it and prepare for the jobs of tomorrow, really what I call the jobs of today. And so in California, we've made a huge investment in our California education sector because, as Monica has said, the pandemic has put a spotlight on the kinds of inequities that have existed for far too long. Right off the bat, we're making sure that every single student, every 4-year-old in our state will have access to universal preschool and universal meals. Yeah, right? Somebody says, wait, that's not technology, but we know that those predictors mean that those students who have access to preschool, that have access to high quality instruction are more likely to graduate and less likely to drop out. To me, this is all about equity. Right now, California, like many states, is struggling to be able to keep up with a lack of affordability in housing, homelessness, food insecurity, you name it. There is no social program that government can create that can do the job better than having a job in a high-tech sector where you can earn a decent living. And so we start with the things that we think will transform education, and then we help our kids get 10,000 counselors to help them. And then we want all of you to make sure that we have computer science from preschool through 12th grade so that our kids understand what are the opportunities. They need exposure. Our kids need to know what the job sector is. They need internships and hands-on learning experience, and they need practical experience to help them understand why they're learning certain mathematical concepts, how those will be applied, how they can see those being used to solve big problems in their communities. And so I would say that the state of education is good in spite of the challenges that our students have experienced. They are resilient, they are ready to learn, they're curious, and they're ready to do. And I know that they're ready to partner with many of you.
Thank you, Superintendent. President Crow, some might think it ironic that we're asking you to talk about the needs of California learners. So from your perspective, especially as an institution that now has a very strong foothold in California, talk to us about the needs of California's learners and what you're doing here in the state.
Yeah, well, first, the United States is a federation of 50 states, not 50 separate countries. And so therefore, you know, we have to find ways to work together. California is unbelievably innovative, unbelievably forward-thinking in so many different areas. We have tens of thousands of California students, but the reason that we set up this meeting 13 years ago here in California, the reason that we think California is really at the edge of all things is that the Western United States is really where innovations accelerate, technological, social, you know, all the things that are happening. And so from our perspective, you know, we decided to just break down these artificial barriers, you know, in our case called the Colorado River, and basically operate under the assumption that Los Angeles, for instance, is one of the 2 global epicenter cities in the United States. Southern California is one of the 10 megapolitans that are emerging in the United States. Phoenix is the center of a second one called the Sun Corridor, 2 of the 10 megapolitans, another one in Northern California. So 3 of the 10 megapolitans, the place where economic growth, social transformation is really accelerating in the United States, are just in this region of the country. So we thought, well, we've got to bring these regions together. We've got to link things together. We've got to draw from innovations. We've got a startup company in downtown Los Angeles. We have a partner company in Los Angeles that's on the next panel here, advancing new technologies. We think that open-mindedness to innovation, which is hard in education, we think that the speed of innovation, which is even harder in education, can, in California, Arizona, Colorado, Utah, Oregon, Washington, a few other places, Nevada, can really start happening in this part of the country. And the United States is really organized around regional economies. Most people don't know, for instance, that if you took all the metropolitan areas in the United States and said, who are the biggest trading partners with Metro LA or Metro San Francisco, it's New York City and then Metro Phoenix. And so it's another thing that we don't understand. So we allow political barriers, organizational barriers, political constraints to limit our thinking. If you limit your thinking in anything associated with innovation, you'll move too slow. If you put political barriers in front of innovation, you'll move too slow. If you don't find ways to absorb, connect, and link with those that are innovating, you won't be creative enough. And so California is the place for us to be linked up, and it's transformed our institution.
Superintendent Thurmond, we've all observed how technology was both useful and also an area that exemplified the great disparities that we have in terms of access, connectivity. What have you learned over these last 2 years? How do you think about taking those learnings and really thinking about what I've heard you refer to as the new learning environment as opposed to the classroom, and how to use technology to eliminate some of those inequities that you've been referring to?
I mean, you point out that the pandemic put a spotlight on something that, quite frankly, I think is embarrassing considering California's technological wealth, that 1 million students started in the pandemic without access to a computer, and maybe another 1 million students without access to high-speed internet. Now, through a combination of government programs and donations, we were able to move 1 million devices to students, but you cannot hotspot your way through preparing students for the jobs of tomorrow. And so our state is now investing $6 billion in broadband for all with a focus on what we do in our schools. We have great leaders like, yeah, that's a great place to put your hands together. We have great leaders like Dr. Barbara Nemko, who is right here in the front of the audience, who's been talking about digital training for families before the pandemic. And we're literally spending billions to make sure that students have devices, that their educators have training, that families have training. But, you know, all of our students have devices that they just got purchased last year. So that means they're already out of date. And if we're not thinking about how we're preparing students to really use that technology, we can't just keep handing them devices. Okay, here's your device. You know, we've got to make sure that we prepare them in a meaningful way. I would say that California represents a meaningful opportunity, right? We're at the ground level. We should never have had a digital divide in California. It's just unacceptable. And so I created this task force on closing the digital divide. We literally leverage ISPs. I'm just going to say it. And we said, you've got to give free internet to kids during the pandemic. And I know that Eloy will talk about how that same need existing in our community colleges. How do our students become the engineers and computer scientists of tomorrow if we're just handing them a hotspot and handing them a laptop that they have to give back at the end of the school year? And so we've approached many challenges, and Spotlight has been put on these challenges and these inequities, but they are opportunities for us to accelerate what our students can learn and do. And again, I would encourage all of you, government can't always keep pace with what happens in the sector, right? We hired our first statewide computer science coordinator for the state. That's one person, right? There's no way that one person can help generate learning that's going to support the needs of 6 million students. But if our companies, our partners in tech and in the sector can help students realize what's happening in real time in technology, it makes the things that they're doing in school, whether it's a maker space or a robotics club or a computer science or STEM class, come alive in a meaningful way. And so I would say that although we've come from a hard place, we're at ground zero for opportunity and investment and for innovation and doing great things going forward.
Let me just say that if it was only technology, we would have solved these problems a long time ago. And so, we've really taken on this task of actually working on the software of the faculty and the design of the institution. So one of the things that we've done, and you and I mentioned this at the beginning, so we've taken engineering, for instance, in just one university from 6,000 students 10 years ago to 27,000 students in engineering in 10 years by restructuring the intellectual design, the technological design, empowerment, and then taking all these kids who were scared off of engineering because of the calculus professor who said, you guys are a bunch of idiots, only a third of you are going to get through the class. Yeah, well, but we had to change all of that. So I'll just say that in addition to all of that stuff, it's about culture change, not just hotspots and technologies, which we need or we can do nothing. But it's about culture change at the end of the day. So.
Eloy, you have talked so often. I have a number of questions, and I know we're going to run out of time, but moving from exclusivity and selectivity to inclusivity, and so I would love to hear you reference that in your remarks. But the community colleges, going back to this issue of sort of the regional nature of both our state and the country, the community colleges have been anchors in terms of regional economic development, ensuring that learners, not students that we think of in traditional ways, but adults who are credentialing, upskilling. What is the future of the community college in terms of its relationship to economic development, workforce training, inclusive economic growth? What are you doing differently now than maybe the community colleges were doing 5 to 10 years ago?
Well, I think it goes back to the point Michael made, which is it's about the culture. How do we think about higher education? And you know, in higher education, any of us who have worked in institutions in America, we've been handed a system that is focused on selectivity. At the end of the day, it is focused on selectivity. Who can we exclude in order to make ourselves look better? But that's not the trick here. The trick here is, how do you lift those who are most disadvantaged? That's the real trick, okay? It's about lift. It's about economic mobility. It's not about just about degrees and where you got that degree. It's about how far can you come with the education that we're providing you? How much of a change can you make for your family? I think that's become more important than ever. So that is really what we're focused on in the California community colleges. It's not just about credential production anymore. It's about economic mobility. The two don't always go hand in hand. You know, is the credential, is the badge, is the degree, is the transfer pathway going to lead you to a better economic future for the people that come out of neighborhoods throughout California that attend the community colleges? Because at the end of the day, we're about serving the top 100% of students in the California community colleges, not the top 1% of students.
Michael, I've heard you talk about, to the point that Eloy just made, which is there are pockets of real innovation across California. People are adopting new models, new techniques, but not at scale. When you think about the size of California, the population, the disparities by subpopulation, how do you bring scale to a state like California?
Well, there's no way for us to advance educational outcomes at the level that we need to in the models of the 19th century, which we're still attempting to do. So we still think in our minds we're trapped in a model that this is a teacher, this isn't a teacher, this is a method, this isn't a method. That's got to go away, because there's no way to take the entire society to the level that we need to go by just building another 10,000 schools or another 1,000 universities, because neither of those things are going to happen. And if neither of those things are going to happen, it means then to get to scale, you've got to think about scale in 3 dimensions. One dimension is across an entire life rather than just at the beginning of a life. And you need to connect learning across the entirety of a person's life. The other scale is the scale of you know, where is the learning opportunity going to occur, the schools themselves. The schools can become epicenters, be they universities, community colleges, or K-12 schools, or whatever they happen to do. They can't just be a place that you go. Every single one of them must be a force in addition to being a place. And then I think the third dimension overall relative to scale is the breadth of learning that a person needs to actually have the ability to engage with. So it's not just about making the population literate. It's about making the population not just literate, but literate in all kinds of things. How about literacy in how a democracy really should work? How about literacy in what a responsible leader actually is? How about literacy in science and technology, so you can make decisions about vaccines and all kinds of other things in a world where there's some mouth telling you on television that there's a messenger ribonucleic acid vaccine that supercomputers have developed over some weekend. Please inject it in your body. And you're like, I don't think so. And so what we have is we have 3 dimensions of scale. And we're not being particularly effective in any of those dimensions right now, because there's resistance in the education community. Deep, deep, deep resistance to culture change. And so we need to think this at the government level in a different way, at the innovation level in a different way, at the institutional level in a different way, and these things are hard. And so that's what you have to set out to try to do. Otherwise we are definitively heading towards not Michael Harrington's 2 societies, but to 3 or 4 societies, the bottom 2 of which have no positive forward momentum whatsoever in any aspect of their lives. And so these things that Eloy was talking about in terms of, and Tony in terms of disparities, I mean, we live in the same world in Arizona. We have the same disparities in Arizona. We have the same complexities in Arizona. And we're actually, with the educational system that we have right now, we're contributing to those. We're actually adding to those. We're not subtracting from those. We're adding to those. And so unless we can think about scale, we will not be successful.
Very provocative. Tony, I want to go to you, because picking up on this, we've also heard you talk about family learning plans that actually, our educational institutions are, go beyond the boundaries of the classroom, of the school buildings. How do you think about it, and community schools might be a good example, but how do you think about it in terms of really being an anchor for that sort of cohesion that we've been talking about, and the role of technology, if you don't mind?
I think there's a cross thread here to doing family engagement in what we do around digital literacy for families. I mentioned Dr. Nemko. In our state, we've spent millions of dollars to help family members be comfortable with technology. Dr. Crow's talked about literacy. You know, we're engaged in a campaign to make sure that our students learn to read by 3rd grade by the year 2026. We've given ourselves a homework assignment because we know that when kids don't learn to read by 3rd grade, they're more likely to drop out. But we have a family engagement component in how we're doing that family literacy. We're identifying 1 million families that need access to books. And we've had a partner with groups like Renaissance that literally said, we will provide you with the ability of families to download books for free. In a 2-month period, a 3-month period, 5 million books were downloaded through Renaissance's partnership in English and Spanish and French. We have partnerships with the 20 Million Minds Foundation and Dr. Michelson, who gave us this push and said, we want to create an innovation challenge. And so for all of you who are looking for the next opportunity, thanks to Dr. Michelson and Genentech and a few other partners, I have $1 million to offer you as a cash prize to create the next great innovation that's going to help our students get access to technology, to get access to the internet, and to prepare for the jobs of tomorrow. We cannot do this without connecting with our families, and so we've built these wraparound programs like community schools to make sure that families get things to address health needs, mental health needs, social service needs, and programs that are going to be what I call transformative in ending the school-to-prison pipeline, because we want to educate our kids, not incarcerate our kids, and give them access to earning a great job. To me, there's nothing more important than earning in a technology sector. But we're going to have to train teachers. We're going to have more educators who have the right training and background. And we're going to have to provide, I think, paid internships to our high school students who are in our career technical sectors so that they get hands-on experience in what's cutting edge right now.
Thank you. And we are almost out of time, so we're going to do just a lightning round. Eloy, what is the final message? What should people take away from this session on the future of education in California?
The future should be focused on democratizing education. If we can focus on that, then I think everybody wins.
Tony?
Invest in California students, and I still have hope because our students are curious.
2 seconds.
2 seconds.
Thank you. President Crow.
Create innovation clusters and let them run so that others can see how it can be done. Otherwise, it's not going to happen.
Okay, thank you all. That concludes our session. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your summit, and we'll see you around. Thank you.